Hey, Coach Rico Lamar back at you with yet another Motivate Monday. I hope you all had a great weekend. I enjoyed mine. Actually got a chance to get out here in this nice weather. Looks like the weather's pretty decent today as well. And so, if anybody lived in Minneapolis and Minnesota, then our weather's pretty unpredictable. It can rain, hail, snow, and be sunny all within a 15 minutes time. So believe me, I've seen it happen. But I just want to welcome you guys back. And this week's topic was actually inspired by a couple of things in the media that I saw, and really, wanted to address some items as well as get you guys' thoughts, and please feel free to share in the comments regarding this particular topic. And so for me, I'm very passionate about this topic. Being an African American man and someone who is in this space of race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I guess I don't really need to say, how it has affected me throughout my entire life. And so, I wanted to give a shout out to those who have taken on the charge of doing the important work in the D&I space, as well as social justice as well, because it takes very brave individuals to tackle some of these issues that may be uncomfortable for a lot of people all the way around. And so I also wanted to take my hat off to some of the officers who are policing the community and serving the community with fidelity, and actually have a true passion for helping individuals, no matter what their walk of life is or their ethnicity. And so with that being said, again, I've done work, I've done several trainings, I've been involved in trainings centered around just conversations about race, and just the work of diversity and inclusion in general. And I've met a lot of people who are business owners, individuals who are very high up, position-wise, within this work as well. And so I really want to address some of the work that's been done, the approaches, and possibly some things that could kind of help and influence decision-making and solutions surrounding this topic. But I really want to get into, there were a couple of things, like I said, in the media that I came across having to do with law enforcement and African American or Black people, Black men in particular, in terms of the interactions that's being had. And so for me, I can't, I think that a lot of the times, because we've been seeing a lot of influx, a lot of increase of these positions popping up with companies all over the nation. Your Twitters, your Ubers, the big Fortune 500 companies where people are being placed. A person of color. It's typically a Black person that's in these roles. Chief of Inclusion, Director of Equity, et cetera, et cetera. There's been a huge leap in that. And so I know within Minnesota, and it was reported that Minnesota is the second worst state in the country for Black people. And our next door neighbor, Wisconsin, is number one. So we definitely have a lot of work to do, just nationwide, but in particularly this particular region on the map. And so we really have to be careful. Those of us who are actually in this space, who's doing this work in this space, what we have to be careful about is that you got to ask the right questions. As I mentioned before, it takes a level of bravery to take on this task, but, it has to be done so with fidelity. And we also have to be very, very deliberate when we sit down with these individuals, whether it's police officer, whether it's, policymakers, those people who are in these decisions who have authority. And so we really have to make sure that we're asking the right questions, because otherwise, you could be doing a disservice to the work at hand. And we know that, nothing happens overnight. We get that, uh, it was a slow progress to get us to where we are now, even though, some would say that it may appear that we're a lot further than what we really are. But the process is made longer when we are not being direct and holding these people or these systems, these organizations accountable all the way around. Okay. And so, and I say that, and this is my focus, and don't get me wrong, accountability is 360. That goes for the people who are administering the law, and that goes for those of us regular civilians who have to abide by it. And so I definitely identify that. But the difference is when you are in a position of authority and you have a sworn oath, you have a whole nother level of power and responsibility on your hands. That's clear. Okay. And so we've already seen situations. I really don't have to go down the list, but we have seen time and time again. And it really seems like it's literally every other day where we're seeing an act of excessive force, police brutality, another black man specifically who lost his life when that didn't even have to be the case. And so we always ask the question of, was that the only option? And so I've had the opportunity to sit down, like I said, with these individuals. I've worked alongside of police officers within, when I worked in the education field. And, I get it. I've also worked 12 years in the security field, which is similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's still similar. I have the responsibility of maintaining the safety within a particular, company, organization, or building that I was responsible for. And so, which also means that the employees and the people that would patron these places were my responsibility as well. So I totally get it. It's not an easy job. If it were easy, everybody would do it, right? But, there were situations where, in these two cases I think I want to mention, and it actually is three of them. But there was one where there was a young man, African-American man, who was in his car, and I think he was leaving a gas station. But it had a police officer who was pointing his gun at this young man, who had his hands in plain sight. Of course, with all this going on, the experiences that several African-American men and women have had, a lot of times you're going to take extra precaution to make sure that you're not shot in these situations. So I think this young man had his hands out the window, or he had them before the cop even approached him. He was already had his hands on display because he already knew what the expectation was. And so, but what happened next was, was pretty scary. This is what a lot of us are faced just on a day-to-day, minding our own business, trying to get from point A to point B. But the officer had instructed the young man to turn the car off. And when the young man went to turn the car off, the officer yelled, "Gun, gun, gun, gun." And so everybody knows what that means. For me, that was just a green light to shoot this young man. And so thank God he didn't shoot him. But at the way he looked over to his partner and he already had his gun on him, yelling, "Gun, gun, gun," and then had the young man react in a way that anybody would react. He totally panicked, screamed at him, "I don't have a gun. I don't have a gun. Just don't, so you can shoot me." This is the climate that we're in. This is the climate that we've been in. This is the climate that we've been trying to navigate, that we've been surviving in. And it doesn't matter your walk of life. It doesn't matter if you went to college. It doesn't matter how many letters behind your name that you have. I mean, Martin Luther King was, Mr. Nonviolent himself even has a mugshot. Was even booked into jail over and over again. And so, I say that to say this. When you're approaching this topic, when you're approaching this work, if you are not getting to the root of the problem, if you do not understand the power of systemic racism, if you don't understand the dynamic of it and how it works, how can you possibly get to the solutions? And the same thing with and this is on both ends of the sword. This is for the police officer as well as the civilian, but more so with the police officer, because oftentimes it's kind of tough for people to be truthful and to hold these conversations with fidelity when you yourself are a part of that system. You see what I'm saying? That needs to be worked on. And so, we always get the argument of, well, there's good cops and not all the cops are bad, and which is true, which may be true. But the question that comes up in our work is that, where are the good cops at the times where a police officer may be taking it too far, where he is clearly pressing the issue, where he is clearly escalating a situation instead of de-escalating a situation, which is his job? Because we've seen this over and over again, where the approach in itself, the way that officer approached the situation was not conducive for a positive interaction. And see, again, this speaks to a deeper issue. Another incident that happened that I came across, there was a black man who had dreadlocks. And some of you may have seen this one. If you haven't, go ahead, you Google it. But this African-American man was playing basketball in his own yard with his son. Okay? Cop approaches him, grabs him, roughs him up. Did so much wrong in a situation, you really don't know where to start. But he called this man by the wrong name 3 different occasions. And the man told him, look, that's not my name. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay? Now, the entire time he's holding this grown man by the arm. Again, this is in front of his family. He pulls his phone out, looks at him, like, is this you? And the guy looks like, hell no, that's not me. And he kept it 100. Because let's be real. A lot of times people act like we don't have the right to be upset when these things are happening to us. A lot of people are always so quick to say, well, if you would have cooperated, well, first of all, have you ever been put in that type of situation where you're minding your own business on your own property, and somebody came up and tried to manhandle you in front of your kid as you're playing basketball with your kid? Okay. So another thing that happened in this situation where the man told him, no, that is not me. He looked at him, he said, that don't look nothing like me. His wife was videotaping this the whole time. And it's clear that this police officer racially profiled this man from the beginning. Okay? You see the black man, he's black with dreads. That was it. Okay? The problem is there are other attributes that we possess, or that goes into describing an individual. I don't have to be a police officer to understand that. Skin tone, facial structure, body structure. Okay? Another thing that was very telling in this situation is that you could hear the man tell the officer, he said, man, you over here shaking, man. What the hell? What's going on? Again, this speaks to yet another issue that we have in the community when it comes to the policing of communities of color and black communities in particular, because I want to be very specific in that, because we can look at the stats. The stats will tell you that black people are more likely to get pulled over. The stats will tell you black people get the more severe penalties when it comes to law. I mean, the stats, the prisons are filled with mainly black and brown people. I mean, we already know. These are the stats we already know of. So it's very critical, very crucial to understand this dynamic, okay? Now, when I look at that, it says fear. It's the same thing with the Philando Castile shooting that we had happen here. Okay, where this man was literally shaking and his voice was trembling. He was scared. And so, what those of you in law enforcement need to understand, and really, I guess one of the crucial questions that I often ask is, how can you possibly do your job effectively if you're fearful of the very people that you have sworn to serve? We can't even say protect no more. I think they even took protect off the police units like over the years. It used to be serve and protect. That's no longer the case. I mean, we we see that now. And so oftentimes, and Lord forbid, like if you're myself, you're former athlete, you're a big guy, you got a voice that carries. A lot of people are fearful by that already. They've already judged you. Now throw some dreadlocks on top of that. It doesn't matter. I can have a doctorate, be a business owner. It doesn't matter. If I'm not in a suit, if I'm just dressed down, many would probably look at me as, oh, he's probably just another thug, from the north side or from whatever. Believe it, this is what people have. People have their perceptions. But my thing is, there's no room for that when you have a certain level of authority and power, when you have such a critical job of keeping our communities safe. So if you have a history of killing the people in the community, mishandling situations, we've seen lies, we've seen the made up, we've seen this. Those of us, you have to understand, who are doing this work, when we go into these organizations, when we go into these places, where we have to try to help them develop policies and come up with solutions to improve the relations in this particular space. We don't have the room to play it too safe. You can't be scared to ask the direct questions that need to be asked. Excuse me. We have to. What we got to do, since it's such a crucial topic and it affects so many, you got to look at the bigger picture of it all. I know I have a son. I have a daughter. And, if you're a black person in particular, these are the things that you fear. And it's so sad that you gotta, the same people that sworn to protect you and to serve the community, you have to kind of warn your kids about, and this is what a lot of white people don't understand. Okay? Can you imagine having that conversation with your kids? Do you understand how confusing that may be? And so that leads me to the other example I want to get to, because I saw an individual who actually sat down with a police officer to discuss, just improving the overall relationships within our urban communities. And so, I made sure I listened very carefully, and, none of the key questions were asked. Okay. And I have to say this to those of us who are doing this important work. And that's why I say we don't have the room to beat around the bush. We don't have the room to sugarcoat things when it comes to the situation because of the severity of the situation. Okay. If you're not talking to them about the training, are they receiving cultural sensitivity training? If you're not talking to them about, their own prejudices and presumptions that they may have as they relate to people who are different than them, you're not getting, you really are doing a disservice to the work of diversity, inclusion, and race equity. You see? And so, again, I just want to be very, very clear on that. And that, like I said, I take my hat off to those of us who are taking the charge of this important work. But again, don't be an individual who just has a title. Don't be an individual who, you pop up in the media and it just looks good. Okay. Because we're looking for results. I've worked for organizations where you got these, you got these boards or you got these groups that's supposed to be addressing the work. But when you look at the past history, you're looking down 7, 10, 15, 20 years, and the needle hasn't been moved even an inch. I'm sorry, but there's an issue there. There's an issue there. And like I said, 9 times out of 10, there's usually a black person in this particular role. Do not allow any organization to utilize you just as merely the face of this initiative. If it's a real initiative, you see what I'm saying? Because if they aren't being deliberate in the approach, if they aren't being fearless in their approach with this work, how much is really going to get done? You see what I'm saying? And so it's more than just receiving a paycheck. It's more than just having that title. Because there are, a lot of our ancestors, there are people who have, we stand on the shoulders of people who have given their life in this work. You understand? And so if we're going to make this world a better place, not only for our own family, for our own children, but just for everybody, particularly people of color, black people. We have to be able to, like I said, we have to be fearless in our charge. And so, like I said, feel free to chime in. This is a topic I could go on and on and on about. I didn't want to get too long with this, but, all opinions are welcome. I love to dialogue with everyone. But like I said, when we talk solutions, sometimes, it's like they say, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's what it comes down to. You have to be comfortable with having an uncomfortable conversation. The reason for that is, if you think these conversations are uncomfortable, imagine how uncomfortable the victims of the injustices are. Imagine what trauma looks like. Can you imagine that trauma? Like, you're just sitting there driving, all of a sudden the cop car gets behind you and people start sweating, hands start sweating on the windshield, hearts start racing. Mind you, you haven't committed a crime at all. But because this dynamic exists, the trauma, it further contributes to the the centuries of trauma that Black people have been faced with. And so again, like I said, you guys want to chime in, feel free to do so. You want to get in contact with me, that's motivatebiz@gmail.com. Again, I look forward to interacting with you guys. Look forward to meeting you guys, and enjoy the rest of your Monday. And as always, stay motivated.